Picture this for a second. You're watching an incredibly intense, emotional scene in a movie. The actors are delivering the literal performances of a lifetime. Then, out of nowhere, boom, an explosion goes off, and the sound of that blast completely, utterly buries every single other noise, including the absolutely crucial lines the characters are desperately shouting. Just like that, all the tension vanishes, and you're left just holding your ears. It doesn't matter if you have the greatest, highest quality audio recordings in the world, they will completely fail if they aren't balanced properly. And you know, that is exactly what we're going to fix in today's explainer.
I mean, we've all been there, right? Constantly riding our TV remotes, cranking the volume way up just to hear what people are whispering, and then scrambling to jam the volume down the second the action starts. Okay, let's dive into this. Because to cure these really frustrating amateur mistakes, we have to learn how to combine all of our isolated sounds into one polished, unified track. You see, it's not just about recording good audio, it's really about how those pieces of audio interact with each other. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to define what audio mixing actually is, establish exactly why dialogue is a priority, look at balancing our other elements, explore some pro-mixing techniques, and then finally cover the common beginner mistakes you need to avoid.
Let's kick things off with Section 1. What is audio mixing? Guiding the audience's attention.
Think of your editing timeline for a minute. You've got dialogue, ambience, Foley, sound effects, and music, and they're all just sitting there on totally separate tracks. Mixing is essentially the core philosophy of taking that audio chaos and organizing it into harmony. So by definition, audio mixing is the process of balancing all the sound elements in a film so they work together to support the story, rather than competing with it. We might have dozens of sounds, but we only have one story. Think of it kind of like a massive theatrical spotlight. Only one or two things can truly be in that spotlight at any given time. If you try to shine a spotlight on every single actor, every prop, and every piece of scenery all at once, the audience just gets overwhelmed. They don't know where to look, or in our case, where to listen. Different sounds have to take the spotlight at different moments.
And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates our hierarchy of sound. It acts as a great proxy for how we actually guide the viewer's focus. To put this into perspective, dialogue hogs a massive 70% of our attention spotlight. Music follows at around 15%, sound effects take up 10%, and ambience is just 5%. Now, obviously, these aren't rigid, unchanging rules for every single second of a film, but they absolutely represent the foundational baseline of a truly balanced mix. And let's look a little closer at that massive 70% slice.
Which brings us to Section 2. Dialogue is the priority, anchoring the mix.
So let's actually build a theoretical scene here, layer by layer, starting with the exact order of operations for a professional mix. Step 1, and this is absolute law: anchor the dialogue. In most films, dialogue is the highest priority, full stop. If your viewers can't understand what the characters are saying, the story is instantly lost, and they're going to check out. Dialogue leads the dance. Once that's firmly anchored, Step 2 is balancing the music around it. Step 3 is layering in your sound effects. And finally, Step 4 is filling the remaining empty space with ambience. Dialogue is king. So when someone starts speaking, pretty much everything else has to move out of the way. All right, Section 3. Balancing music and effects. The supporting cast. Let's see how this whole thing builds with our supporting sonic layers. Once your dialogue is set in stone, this supporting cast comes into play. First up, music. Music is there to support emotion, right? Not overpower it. So when a conversation is happening, the music absolutely must sit quietly underneath the dialogue. A technique pros often call ducking. The audience should feel the music without ever struggling to hear the words. Then we add the sound effects. These emphasize actions, but they need to scale based on importance. A door closing gently in a quiet room should absolutely not have the same maximum volume as a massive car crash. And finally, ambience. Ambience is the glue. It fills the empty spaces between the dialogue and the effects to create this subtle continuity. It stops scenes from feeling empty, dead, or artificial. It should be there for sure, but it should be entirely subtle. Moving on to Section 4, professional mixing techniques, the tools of the trade. So the crucial point is, how do we actually pull off this magical balance? Well, the first major tool is volume automation. This is basically the process of creating smooth fades and subtle level adjustments so that audio changes feel polished and incredibly natural. Professional editors rarely just chop a volume level down suddenly. It's jarring. Instead, they use automation keyframes. They'll slowly fade the music in, or gradually make the dialogue louder as a character approaches the camera, or gently let the sound effects drop out. These smooth, intentional changes are exactly what makes a soundtrack feel pro.
The next really cool technique is panning. Panning is just placing sounds between your left and right speakers. Think about a shot of a car driving from the left side of your screen over to the right side. By panning the audio, the actual sound of that car's engine moves from your left speaker over to your right speaker in real time. It creates this incredibly powerful sense of movement and 3D space. But again, it's got to be used carefully to support the visual action, not distract from it.
Let's put this into a real-world scenario so you can see how these tools transform a scene. Imagine a family enjoying dinner while a heavy rain falls outside. In version A, our totally unmixed version, the dialogue, the dramatic music, the rain outside, and the clinking of plates and dishes are all playing at the exact same maximum volume. It's a mess. The soundtrack feels crowded, confusing, and honestly pretty stressful. But then we look at version B, our pro mix. Here we use volume automation and panning. Now the dialogue is crystal clear and anchored. The music sits gently underneath the conversation. The rain is just a subtle texture in the background, and the sound of the cutlery is realistic, but it's not grabbing your attention. It's wild because the exact same raw recordings become infinitely more enjoyable just by balancing their levels.
And finally, Section 5, Common Beginner Mixing Mistakes. What to avoid.
So we know what to do, but honestly, it's just as important to know what jarring pitfalls to avoid. And what's really interesting here is how instantly you can spot the difference between an amateur track and a professional one. Beginners tend to make every single sound equally loud because they're trying to make the scene feel powerful. Professionals, on the other hand, balance the levels. Beginners will often leave sweeping music totally overpowering the important dialogue, while the pros automate that music to gracefully duck underneath. And maybe most dangerously, beginners often push the overall volume so high that the audio actually clips and distorts. It creates this harsh, fatiguing soundtrack that literally exhausts the listener's ears. A pro mix, it always remains clean, crisp, and natural.
Listen, if you take exactly one golden rule away from this explainer, let it be this. Mixing is about balance, not maximum loudness. Louder absolutely does not mean better. Clearer means better. Making the mental shift from just stacking individual audio files on a timeline to holistically mixing them together, that is one of the ultimate defining characteristics of a professional editor.
To achieve that perfect balance, professional mixers are constantly asking themselves one fundamental emotional question. Where should the audience's attention be right now? Every single volume adjustment you make, every smooth fade, every subtle pan to the left or right speaker, it's all designed solely to answer that one question. A truly successful mix guides the audience through the story without them ever once noticing the technical work going on behind the scenes.
Well, look at that. We've taken totally chaotic, isolated sound files and successfully woven them in to a cohesive, perfectly balanced soundtrack. But there is one final step before the world can actually hear it. Next up, we'll be tackling mastering and exporting audio, where we're going to learn how to prep this beautifully balanced track for different platforms without introducing any distortion or losing an ounce of quality. Until then, I want to leave you with this thought. When you're layering the audio on your next project, ask yourself, are you just cranking up the volume, or are you actually guiding your audience?